common question with GCSE citizenship is how much do I need to know about past elections? In actual fact, if you do need to recall specific details about elections, they will likely be given to you as a source in the exam. However, there are two useful reasons to have a look at some past elections. Firstly, it puts what you have been learning about the democratic process and how elections work in the UK into context. Secondly, having background reading around a subject always means that you will be able to write more cohesively about it. Specifically, therefore, we're going to look at three important general elections of the last 40 years or so. The first of these is the 1979 general election. The overall result of this was a Conservative majority, and Margaret Thatcher becoming the new Prime Minister. The actual seat results were that the Conservatives gained 339 seats, Labour 269, and the Liberals 11. At this election, the Conservatives were led by Margaret Thatcher, Labour by the Prime Minister at the time, James or Jim Callaghan, and the Liberals by David Steel. There are several important trends and points about the 1979 election. Turnout was very high. It was up slightly from 1974 at 76%. This is a very high turnout, higher than most elections. The Conservative Party gained 43.9% of the vote. It's often the case that governments are formed in the UK with much less than 50% of the vote. Some of the vote goes to smaller parties, but because only the most votes are needed in a seat to win it, generally the winning party will have between 40 and 45% of the vote. Voters in this election swung away from both the Labour Party and the Liberal parties towards the Conservatives. Labour had suffered through the recent Parliament a string of industrial disputes before and during. In particular, there was the incident known as the Winter of Discontent, when many people went on strike, leading to rubbish and bodies piling up in the streets, a 3-day working week, and power shortages across the country. The Conservatives won this election under their new leader, Margaret Thatcher, by promising to deal with the unions, put them in their place, and restore a strong, stable government, not at the mercy of industrial disputes. Overall, we can say that 1979 marked a very much rightward shift in the UK electorate. It began 18 years of Conservative rule consecutively, firstly under Margaret Thatcher and then after 1990 under John Major. The old style of politics, especially for the Labour Party, where they were dependent on and constantly grappling with the trade unions, was ended. From 1979, the UK became less of a trade union economy and became more and more one driven by consumerism. Many people hadn't expected the Conservatives to win this election as decisively as they did. Margaret Thatcher had a reasonable majority in 1979, and indeed, if you watch the election broadcast, through much of the election night, it was unclear by how much the Conservatives would win. Many people were also sceptical about the UK having a female Prime Minister. People were also sceptical about Margaret Thatcher's personality. Some people saw her as too far to the right for it to be electorally credible. However, to sum up, in 1979, the Conservatives won the election, beating the Labour government, forming the new government, and starting 18 years of Conservative rule. The 1997 general election is one of the most momentous of modern times. The overall result was that there was a huge Labour majority, with Blair becoming Prime Minister. The actual seat results were that Labour, under Tony Blair, its leader since 1994, got 418 seats, one of the largest ever recorded by any winning party in an election, certainly the largest in modern times. That number of 418 seats was actually so much that all of the Labour MPs together could not sit on the government benches, and some had to spill over onto opposition benches or into the aisles. The Conservatives gained a massively reduced 165 seats under John Major, who had been Prime Minister since 1990 after taking over from Margaret Thatcher. This was regarded as an absolutely crushing defeat. Many Conservatives who thought they were in safe seats lost their seats. The Liberals, or Liberal Democrats as they were by this point, were under their leader Paddy Ashdown, a widely trusted but slightly mocked figure. They gained 46 seats, one of the largest for a third party at any recent election. As with the 1979 general election, there were trends and points worth making about the 1997 general election, which could be useful in an exam. Turnout was down slightly at 71.3%. This is likely because many Conservative voters were sure the Conservatives would not win, and therefore didn't bother to vote. The weather may also have played an issue. Huge numbers of voters swung against the Conservative government, whereas in 1979, 83 and 87, the Conservatives had built up a coalition of many different people in society, many different parts of the middle and working classes, and the new consumers. Many of these swung against them. The Labour Party, then known as New Labour under Tony Blair, had managed to move sufficiently to the centre for many Conservative voters to trust them on traditionally conservative matters like the economy. Because of this, many incredibly safe Conservative seats that had previously had large majorities of 10, 12, or even 15,000 votes were taken by Labour. There were many what were known as scalps taken by Labour in this election, where high-profile or cabinet ministers' seats were lost to Labour. Famously, Michael Portillo, who was a senior figure in the Conservative government at the time, lost his seat in Enfield unexpectedly. This was regarded by many watching as the highlight of the night. The swing was mainly from Conservative to Labour, and a solid swing at that, between 5 and 10% in most seats. Although the Liberal Democrats did lose a very small number of votes, about 1%, that mostly also moved to Labour. Mr. Blair therefore had an enormous majority to form a government. He was able to carry out many of the reforms that he had put in his manifesto, and this election began the longest continuous string of Labour governments, lasting from 1997 all the way through to 2010. It also represented what was considered to be a swing to the centre in British politics. John Major in the preceding years had dragged the Conservatives further and further to the centre, but had been hamstrung by the right wing of his party, especially on Europe. Blair realised and theorised that for Labour to be elected again, after he became leader in 1994, he had to drag his party towards the political centre so that many voters who had been voting Conservative would trust them on traditionally Conservative issues such as the economy and law and order. In doing so, he managed to gain a huge swing in his favour and got that large majority. The 1997 election was one of the most momentous of modern times. It was also the one for which many people have fond memories, being a dramatic night. Lastly, we will look at the most recent general election at the time of writing, the 2019 general election. The overall result of this was a Conservative majority, with Boris Johnson continuing as Prime Minister. He had recently taken over from Theresa May after winning the Conservative leadership election. This was therefore not an election in which he would be elected as a new Prime Minister coming from being leader of the opposition, but one in which a sitting Prime Minister would continue on in that role. The overall results were Conservative 365 and Labour 202, with other parties getting some seats. However, unlike previous elections, this was predominantly a two-horse race, with many smaller parties being reduced in seats. The Liberal Democrats were down, for example, to just 11. The Greens continued with just 1. The party leaders were the Conservative leader Boris Johnson, who was also the current Prime Minister, and the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. Of course, with the 2019 general election being the most recent, it's potentially the one you can expect to be asked about in the exam. Turnout was very low, at 67.3%. The general theory is that most Labour voters were confident that they would not win and didn't bother to vote. As a general rule, low turnout does favour the Conservative Party. It's also possible that many members and voters for smaller parties were so convinced that it wasn't worth voting that they didn't. 67.3% is not the lowest turnout that's been seen in a general election, but it is very much on the low side. A lot of voters did swing away from Labour, but not that many swung to the Conservatives. This tends to mean two things. Either voters swung from Labour to other parties, predominantly the Brexit Party or Greens or Liberal Democrats, but in all likelihood it also means that many Labour voters didn't vote. A fact worth noting is that the Brexit Party were a new party at this election, considered by many to be the successors to UKIP. The leader of UKIP for many years was Nigel Farage, a vehement proponent of Britain's exit from the EU. After leading UKIP to a successful conclusion where they gained the result they wanted in the referendum, he then left UKIP and set up the Brexit Party with the goal, as he claimed, to ensure a clean Brexit. As the Conservative Party seemed to many Brexit voters to have been dithering through the years, he gained a large amount of support at the start of the campaign. But as election day neared, this percentage of the vote declined sharply, as many of his voters decided that to secure a Brexit they would be better voting Conservative and ensuring a Conservative victory. Many of them feared that if the Brexit Party got too many votes, that would hand seats to the Labour or Liberal Democrats, which would deny Brexit happening either in the way they wanted or at all. Similarly, the Liberal Democrats, who had taken a strong anti-Brexit stance throughout the campaign, started the election campaign on a very high percentage of the vote, as many people who were opposed to Brexit identified with them. As the campaign swung on, however, difficulties for their leader, combined with a feeling for many voters that they would be better voting for Labour, led to their support trailing away. While they didn't lose huge numbers of seats at the election, they did lose some, going down to just 11. For most voters, this election was dominated by Brexit. Other parties did try to capitalise on a different narrative, particularly the Greens trying to make it the climate election, to some limited success. However, the swing away from Labour did allow the Conservatives to pick up traditionally working-class Labour constituencies in places that they had not held seats for many years, particularly northern industrial areas, which had traditionally been strong Labour-supporting seats in the northeast around Newcastle and Sunderland, around Leeds and Bradford, and in the Midlands around Birmingham. Overall, this led to a Conservative majority under Boris Johnson, who was seen as a widely popular figure among those who had voted or wished to leave the EU.